Hi, I'm Lori from Movida Sewing and Design Studios in Vancouver, Canada. I am the founder and the creative director here. We've been here for about 10 years and our specialty is teaching non-sewers how to sew, new sewers. We teach kids and adults from 8 up to the oldest student being, I think, around 80 years old. The premise of the studio is to have a lot of fun and to make projects that make clothing that are stylish and fashion forward, but mostly to learn how to do this craft in a really fun way. I was originally a self-taught sewer. I didn't like to do things very conventionally, so I taught myself how to sew. Back in the old days, everybody had a sewing machine and everyone knew how to sew, so I was able to ask people, but I really wanted to learn my own way. Later on, I did go to design school, and so I do have that design background and been sewing now for over 40 years. Here in the studio, we make all of our own patterns and we make them specifically for new sewers. It's sort of our specialty. As well, we make a lot of patterns for young people, which are hard to find. We have taught Learn to Sew classes since the beginning, so for 10 years, and we do them about once a month. And we always start off with the tote bag. It's changed over the last couple of years. Now we do this beautiful sling bag, and we have lots of contemporary styled fabric. Today, we're gonna go over it with a double wax cotton, which is, a nice fabric that makes a beautiful bag. The reason why we chose this pattern is because no matter how many ways you think you're gonna screw it up, it's always gonna turn out nicely. The patterns are all made with the seam allowance included at 5/8. But if you end up sewing this a little bit more or a little bit less, or your stitches aren't quite straight, it's a fully lined bag and all of your mistakes will be hidden inside. It's a great way to get started. And the more you make this bag, the better it is for your sewing experience. The project that we are going to be sewing up today is what we call our Sling Tote bag. It is a fully lined bag, has a pocket inside. It's got handles as well as an adjustable sling. It's got some hardware on it. This particular one is made out of a double wax cotton, and that's the one we're gonna make this time. But we also create it out of a single wax cotton. You can make it out of canvas, you can make it out of leather, you can make it out of almost anything, any fabric that you wanted, depending on the style that you're looking for. When you get the pattern from La Movida, you'll be able to print it off yourself, or we can send you the printed copy of the pattern. It's very simple. Printing cost, if you do it, is about $5. And it comes out like this. The way that we have designed our patterns is that as it prints out is exactly the way that you're gonna lay it out on the fabric. For many new students, figuring out which way the pattern pieces lay out on the fabric can be very challenging. And so this one is straightforward. You're just gonna lay the pattern down right on top of the fabric, pin it into place, and cut it out. You can also, more traditionally, cut out the pattern pieces and then lay them on, either pinning them or tracing them. But this way, no matter what, you've got the exact layout of the pattern as it should be seen or as it should be laid out on the fabric, making it a no mess up first time pattern.
To make your bag, you're going to need a pair of fabric scissors, perhaps a pair of paper scissors, a fabric marking tool, fabric pins, matching thread, maybe a measuring tape, and some pattern weights. When you get your Sling Tote pattern, you can opt for us to print it for you or get it as a PDF. Either way, your pattern will look like this. This will explain the pattern layout of all the pieces. We designed it so that you could lay it out exactly the way you need to cut it on the fabric. The fabric we are using today is a double wax cotton. You can get this from our online fabric shop bundled with the pattern. To make this bag, you will need exactly 1 meter of fabric. In the studio at La Movida, we have big tables to lay everything out. But when we are doing this tutorial, we are doing it on a smaller desk, so you can see this project will work at your kitchen table, on your floor, or wherever works at home. If you're making your entire bag using just one fabric, you can line up your pattern, making sure that it's right on the fold. Take your pins and pin the pattern to the fabric. If you need 1,000,000 pins, you can get away with 6 pins per piece. Then you're going to take your fabric scissors and cut all the way around all the pieces. We are doing a separate fabric for the lining of this bag because it will be easier for you to see. If you wanted to do a different fabric for the lining of your bag, you will need 1/2 meter of each fabric. So if you're using a different lining fabric, you'll need to take your paper scissors and cut straight down the dotted line. For our lining, we are cutting out our inside body and our pockets. We are laying out our fabric selvage to selvage and laying the pattern directly on top, lining up the place on fold to the fold. When you pin, you will place them on the inside of where you're cutting to keep them out of the way. We are cutting out using fabric scissors. Fabric scissors are flat on the bottom so they can sit down on the table. You're going to have 3 or 4 fingers in the bottom and your thumb in here. When you're cutting, you're doing a squeezing motion, which helps the scissors react better. You can cut these pieces right out of the paper. Usually when you're sewing, you want to make sure your fabric scissors are never used on anything but fabric, as you will want to prevent the blades from getting dull. But we really wanted to design our patterns to be beginner friendly, and we found that figuring out the pattern layout can be really difficult your first time out. You are not going to cut along the line that says place on fold, but you do want to cut these corners. And then you want to do a little 1/4 inch snip in each of these notches. If you want to preserve your fabric scissors, you can cut out all the pieces and then place them onto the fabric. All of these patterns have information on them. Your grain line is on them, where you're going to cut to the fold, and all the little notches. When you're placing these, you want to make sure your grain line goes parallel to the fold and salvage. When we do it here in the studio, we place metal washers on top and use them as pattern weights. When you're placing your pattern pieces, you're always doing your best to line up the edges as close together as possible to conserve fabric. So now that we have that all lined up, I'm taking my tailor's chalk and tracing all around the pattern, except where it's placed on the fold. Don't forget your notches. Then you're going to remove your pattern and pin through all the layers, and then cut out on your marked line. We are repeating those steps for the straps as well. Once you're finished cutting, you should have 2 short handles, a long strap, the outside of the bag, your pockets, and your lining. There are a few methods to construct your strap. In the studio, we often use the finger press method. You will press your strap in half, hot dog style, using the heat of your finger to crease it all the way across. Then you're going to open it up and fold your raw edges towards the inside crease. Then it gets folded together. Quilter's clips are helpful to hold this and fold it together. You can also use pins for this. If you find it hard to crease your fabric, you can instead use a ruler to find the center and mark it. Then use this line as your guide to fold. You can also use an iron to press the fold. All the other steps are the same. Fold in half, open up, and fold the edges in. Then bring it together. So this is what all your straps should look like when you've finished pinning them. When you are sewing this, you are sewing a 1/4 inch away from the double folded edge and going along the folded edge as well. My sewing machine is set on a straight stitch with a 2.5 stitch length. I'm using the edge of my presser foot as a guide for the 1/4 inch top stitch and going down both sides of all the straps. While you're at your sewing machine, you can also zigzag on the edge of the pockets. This prevents them from fraying. I am switching my machine to the zigzag stitch and making the stitch length a little bit bigger, then sewing all around the edges. Now that that's ready, we're looking for our notches we snipped in the fabric, and then folding along that line and finger pressing it, and just pinning it on each side. If your fabric isn't working for the finger press, you can also press it with an iron.
And that will give you a nice crease, and then you can clip it or pin it.
Alternatively, you can mark on the wrong side of your fabric using a ruler to line up the notches, and then fold on that line and pin.
Give yourself a line, and then from this side, go over and press it. Now we're gonna go sew, and we're gonna do a 5/8 seam allowance, and we're just gonna sew here. So we're just gonna sew right there at 5/8 and right there at 5/8 on both of our pockets, here and here.
On our sewing machine, there's a marker for making a 5/8 seam allowance. If yours doesn't, you can mark it with a piece of tape.
Okay, so we've sewn both sides. We can take our pins out. We're gonna take our scissors and we're just gonna trim off the corner, not hitting the line of stitching here.
Then you're going to put your thumbs in the corners and flip it over, really making sure to poke out the corners. Then you're pinning that flap down. And we are sewing it a 1/4 inch away from that edge, as well as at the top of the pocket.
This, and we're going to use the iron to press this into place. So because we sewed this at 5/8, this means that this seam here will also be at 5/8. So what we're going to do is, first off, we're going to fold up the bottom edge at 5/8. If you can eyeball it, or you can measure it up first like that, get a nice crease in it. I'm going to come down the side. And then you're going to come across here, press it like so. In place. Take a pin, I'm just going to hold that in place. I'm going to hold that one in place. Okay.
We are taking our Sling Tote lining and opening it up. Using our notches to line it up right across the top. There is a notch here and notches here.
And there are 2 notches up here.
I am using my ruler to line up the notches across here. Then I'm centering my pocket along this line, and then I'm pinning it in place along the 3 sides we just pressed.
Check it before I... Another pin here, pin here. I'm going to take these 2 little clips out, and I'm going to put the 2 pins bottom. Nice and centered, and then we're going to stitch it down on 3 sides.
For my second one, I haven't pressed it because I'm showing you can just finger press it, and we are going to place it the same way.
And you can also measure it. It is 5/8, 5/8. We're going to put that ruler across the top again to those 2 notches. There are 2 notches here, so we're going to line it up. We are going to pin, and I'm going to fold those sides in.
Something to pay attention to is how you fold the bottom. We are trying to fold in the ugly part so you can't see it.
And then I'm just going to fold this in and pin it in place. Okay, there we go. So the same thing. Then we're going to stitch down here, either side. This is the top of the bag. That's where our stuff goes in, and this is the bottom of the bag. We're going to stick it in. We're going to use this side of the foot as our guide.
It's important to make sure you are back stitching right at the top so that your pocket doesn't pull away from the bag when you start using it. Don't forget to trim off all your tails of threads when you're done.
So now we have sewn the pockets onto the bag, and so it looks like this. And we are now going to add the handles. So we've got our handles complete, and on the top of the bag there are 2 notches. If you forgot to mark them, you can go back and mark them. The idea is that we are going to line up the handle to the inside mark, and we're going to put it across here, and we're gonna pin it onto there. And then we're gonna take it to the sewing machine and we're gonna stay stitch it because we wanna make sure that those handles stay in. So I'll show you how to pin those. So we've got our handle, and this is the top edge of the bag. We've got our 2 little notches. So we're just gonna line this up like this, and you're gonna put 2 pins in, out, in, and okay, and then this one's gonna come around, tucked into there. You can use a clip if that's easier. The reason being is if you only put in 1 pin and you put the pin in the middle, then sometimes what happens is the handle will shift when you're sewing it in. So we really want to make sure that this is flat across there. So we're going to take this edge here and align it up to this edge here. There's your notch. So you're going to put on the inside of the notch like this, twice. Pin and pin. We're going around, we want to go and make sure that we don't twist this. That is not a good idea, right? So you want to make sure that it goes in nicely and that it's not twisted. That is the right way.
We're going to sew this across here, and we're going to go forwards, backwards, forwards to make sure it's in nice and secure at the top of the bag.
Okay, so now we've got the top of the handles on the bag right here. We're just going to trim off the threads a little bit, and then we're going to attach it to the other side.
So we are taking the outside bag, taking the pins out of it, and just lining it up right on top and pinning or clipping it across the top.
Make sure that this is nice and straight. So
you're going to be sewing from notch to notch. We leave about a 2-inch space from the edges here to give us room to put in the adjustable strap later.
Here. You're lining up those notches there and these notches here.
I'm going to sew this at 5/8 across the top using our straight stitch. With the clips, you have to remember to pull them out before you sew over the area. So just be extra careful when using the clips instead of pins to make sure the fabric remains flat when sewing.
Okay, so now you've got your bag and you've sewn across the top, and now we're going to sew the side seams. So this is just a little bit of the tricky bit. You're going to go like this, and you're going to move the bag around so it looks like this. So you've got both of the brown on this side of the outer bag, and you've got the inside on this side, and you're going to kind of line up those corners a little bit so that they line up. And we are then going to sew down this side and this side, as well as this side and this side. And when you do it, because we've left that opening, it's quite easy. You're just going to line these up. There is a little notch here, so you can double check your notches and make sure they line up. And they're going to go like this, and you're going to pin down here and sew down here. We're not doing this. This is not the part you're doing. You're just going straight down the side.
Okay, so we are pinning down here, making sure to line up these edges beautifully.
Boom.
Coming to this side, making sure the other side is out of the way. Making sure your notches are lined up well.
Pin, 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 and pin.
On our lining, you're going to want to leave a no-sew zone, starting where your notch is and then about 4 or 5 inches down. So then we are sewing along each of the sides with a 5/8 seam allowance.
make sure that sits nicely.
Again, you want to make sure the top is separated on each side. At your no sew zone, you'll stop and backstitch and then start again at the bottom. Now you're doing your corners. You're shoving your fingers on the inside and opening the bag like this. It's important that you go all the way down the bag to make sure that these two edges line up nice and straight. It may be a little bit off if it's cut or sewn unevenly, but don't worry about it too much. Just make sure you do your best to get them as straight as possible. Make sure your seam allowances are spread open and flat at the bottom and pin on both sides, repeating for all four corners.
Clips. So now we're just going to sew across here at 5/8. So we're just going to put it in here. We're going to look behind here and make sure it's smooth and that the bag's not cut up underneath. You're going to sit it in there. You're going to lead needle down and you're going to back up until you get all the way to the edge of the fabric, okay? All the way to the edge, and then you're coming forward right across, and going right to the very edge, and then again. So it's going to look like that. Make sure your seams are on the top, but make it so there's no puckers. Ta-da! Okay, so we've got our bag, we've completed our corners, so our bag is getting close to being finished. We are just going to turn it right side out and add our handles. So I'm just going to take these pins out of our corners because they're all done, and we are going to flip the bag. So we're going to go into our no sew zone that's right here, and we're just going to grab onto the bag and we're going to pull it out. In to the inside, and we're just going to pull the bag outside. I knew this part would be hard. It's a little tricky, but it comes. And you can see our wax cotton is gotten all like bent or whatnot, and so the color has gone light, so that's the wax. And then what you can do is you just put it under the iron or the heat, and then it'll turn dark brown again. So those are just caused by the wax creasing. Okay, so there's our bottom corners out of the outside bag there. And this is our inside bag. We're gonna come back and sew this hole up later, but right now we need to keep it. So we're gonna put the inside bag on the inside. So it looks like this. And now you can see, of course, your handles are coming up beautifully. Bag fits inside. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna put that long strap on. And because we've left holes here, so you can see right there, there's a hole here and there's a hole here. We're going to stick our strap inside those and sew them on. So I'm going to show you how to do that. You've got your really long strap here, and what we need is a 3-inch piece cut off the end. I'm just going to take my ruler and I'm just going to mark it. We're going to cut it off like this. Okay, so you've got this little piece. This piece is for the little tab in the end. So you've got hardware. It looks like this. We're taking the squared ring. So you're going to stick it on the end here. So if you haven't made your strap skinny enough, then you could have some trouble getting in here. So that's the only reason why you want to make sure your strap is the right fit to get through there. It can be a little bit skinnier, but it's going to go like that. So you're just going to put it through and you're going to wrap it around like that. And then you're going to find a hole in the side and you're just going to place it in there like that, so that it's lined up centered with that outside seam. And then this is a bit of the tricky part. You're then gonna take your hand and you're gonna go into your no sew zone, your hole, and you're going to grab onto all of the pieces. So my hand's inside and I'm holding onto it like that. And I'm holding this and the tab. And I'm hanging onto it like that. And what I'm gonna do is I'm then gonna pull it out through the hole. And you can pull it as far as you can. Give yourself like quite a bit of the bag. And then what you're gonna try and do is you're just gonna try and straighten out the top edge. So this is definitely the trickier part. So you're gonna straighten out the top edge like that. And there is, so you can just see it, this is your little tab. It goes in this way, and this seam here is gonna line up parallel to these seams here. And so your line of stitching is coming to here, then you stopped, and your line of stitching is coming here, then you stop. And so all we wanna do is we're gonna pin it in place, and we're gonna sew it across like that. And we're gonna butterfly this here and butterfly this one here as well, like that. I'm gonna put a clip in the middle, like this, to hold those together. And I'm gonna put some pins in, and I put the pins on either side of the strap. Sometimes it's a bit hard to go through all the layers of the strap, but this will actually hold it in place. And then we're gonna sew right across there. This is our long strap, and we're just gonna strap into here. So what you're gonna do is you just want to put it in just like about that much and stick it into the hole. Again, we're sort of centering it on here. We're gonna stick it into the hole. Then you're going into your no-sew zone, your hole in your bag, and you're gonna put your hand in here, and you're gonna grab onto all of the layers. So I'm grabbing onto this, I'm grabbing onto this, and I'm grabbing onto this. So I've got all of them in my hand. And then again, I'm gonna pull them all the way out. Let's see if you can pull it quite far. And then again, there's your tab. You can push that back in again. You kind of want it to line up parallel to the edge, so I'm just gonna shove it in a little bit. And I'm gonna butterfly this seam, open. The same with on the back. I'm gonna open this up so it's butterflied. I'm gonna make sure that this is centered and that it's straight if I possibly can. So it looks like that. And again, my stitching comes to here, and my stitching is here. And when we sew it, we really wanna connect those two lines of stitching. So you're gonna come across and connect those lines of stitching. Again, I'm gonna use a clip here because it's quite thick, but you can pin it and pin it there. And then I like to go in and pin it on either side of the strap because it's definitely skinny enough to do that there. And we're gonna go in and we're just gonna sew from here to there. Okay, so we're just gonna stitch from this line of stitching. We're gonna go across here and we're gonna catch it up to that line of stitching. And we're gonna make sure that all of this is pulled out of the way. Line it up. Caught there, straight across, caught up to there. The other side looks like that, nice and straight across. So you're gonna go like this. Again, we're going from here, straight across to here. This is nice and flat. There's your back side. Going from here, it's gonna go straight across from there. Okay, so we just finished putting our strap in. I pulled the pin out. Now we're gonna turn the bag right side out again so we can see our handiwork. We have our little tab coming out of this side that looks like that, and it's nicely secured in there. And we've got our strap here nicely secured there. So now we have the opportunity. We are going to go ahead and sew up this portion. So that's your no-sew zone. So all you're gonna do is sort of you can take it right out if you want. And you're just gonna tuck in the seam allowance like that. And we are going to pin it where the opening is. And I like to put a pin just beyond where it's stitched. So right there. And then here it's open to here. And I'm gonna put one just beyond that so I know exactly where to sew. And then one or two in the middle. And you want these to line up pretty nicely. So if you want the bag to be fully reversible, you can hand stitch this up using a ladder stitch, and that means that it'll be beautifully finished so the bag can go both sides. If you're a little less concerned about beauty, or you know one's going to be the inside or the outside, we can sew it on the sewing machine. That's the part I'm going to show you. And what you want to do is you want to sew it really nice and close to the edge. If you sew it over at 5/8, what'll happen is that this will open up, and so you don't want that to open up. So you want to come nice and close. And the other thing, you want these to line up, because if you go close, you don't want to miss the bottom layer. So we're going to sew between there and there to close up your no-sew zone. And we're going to stitch from here to here, pretty close to the edge. So we're going to stick it in like this. So it's going to look like that. Same on the other side. Pins out. So we've sewn up the no-sew zone inside, and now we're going to top stitch the top of the bag. It's a really good idea at this point that you're going to press the top of the bag. And what you're trying to do is do something called roll your seam, which means you're just going to move this back and forth, and you want the seam of the top of the bag to run right along the top. And so you can see it. Sometimes what happens when we're sewing is that it will fold in like that, and so you don't want it like that. So you're gonna make sure that it comes out. Once you got it all nice and pressed, so the inside bag's on the inside, the outside bag's on the outside, and it's nice and straight, what we're gonna do is top stitch around here. And it's pretty good. Even if it's pressed, it's not a bad idea to put a couple of pins in it and make sure that the inside bag doesn't shift around, or the outside for that matter, as you're sewing it. Okay, so we're gonna go and just pin it around here. If you know for sure that this is going to be the inside, the other thing that you can do is you can turn it slightly so that the inside bag is a little bit more on the inside and the outside bag is a little bit like almost coming onto the inside, a tiny little bit. That way, no matter what, from the outside of the bag, you don't see the lining. So here where I've gone even, you might see a little bit of the green from the brown side. But if you want to make sure that you don't, you can turn that seam in so that the brown is just slightly coming to the inside of the bag. If you were using matching colors, then of course it doesn't make any difference at all. But what you really are looking at is trying to get that seam pressed out nicely so it's not folded over. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch all the way around. It's not necessary, you can go without, but it is a nice finish. And depending on how good your sewing skills are, technically you would want the top stitch to be the same distance as there. So you're going to do a 1/4 inch top stitch. But if your sewing skills are not that great, you easily could put it down at 5/8 or an inch. No matter how far down, it will still give a nice finished look at the top of the bag. So now we're going to sew across the top. So we're going to take off our tray and put it here. We're sliding this back in like this. I'm moving my needle over further so that I can get a 1/4 inch stitch. And I am laying her down like that. I'm going nice and slow at the beginning because this is a lot of fabric. Okay, so now we're going to add the adjustable buckle. The strap is attached to the top of the bag. We have our D-ring or a square D-ring attached here. We are going to take our long strap and we are going to slide this buckle on. So you're going to go in one side, like so, and you are going to pull it quite far along, and then you're going to slide it back down the other side of that sliding pin, okay? You're gonna wanna leave a really big bubble here, okay? So I'm gonna slide it along. So you've got like a really pretty big bubble here, and you've got a fair amount of strap there. So it's gonna look like about like that. We're gonna then take this long piece of the strap and we're gonna push it through the D-ring from the outside coming towards the inside of the bag. So if it's away from you, right, we're coming towards the handles. And you're gonna come through like that. You're gonna fold it over and you're going to come up back through on the same side that you just came out. So it came down on this side of that pin. So we're gonna go back up that side like that. So it's gonna look like that. And then we're gonna go back down the same side that we originally came in. So we're just gonna cross over the top of the pin and go back down this side of the pin. So it's gonna come down like this. We're going to fold this over a tiny little bit, like maybe a ½ inch, and we are going to sew this to this part here. Not to both sides, just to this part. If you sew both sides together, it won't be adjustable. So it's just gonna come onto this side. You're gonna just pull on this a little bit to give yourself a little bit of a room, right? This is easily movable. You're gonna push all of this out of the way, and you're gonna go to your machine and you're just gonna sew it like that across there. We're gonna make sure this is out of the way. We're just stitching this to this. So I'm gonna stick it in. I am actually gonna start in the middle and then go back, right across forward, and then stop in the middle again. Okay, drop it in. Okay, so there's our finished bag. It looks pretty great. I think it looks pretty great. You can tell by me that if I'm gonna make another one, I might not make it brown. My favorite colors, might be my next choice. But my suggestion is that you go ahead and make a second and a third bag. I think it's an excellent idea to get more practice, because as you get more used to the construction of the bag, you'll be able to make it faster. And that should give you a more sense of satisfaction. You should be able to get it finished, a second or a third one, in sort of half the time. And also you'll find that your stitching gets a little bit neater and a little bit better. They make a great gift, and also, different outfits. We have our bag pattern on sale on the website. Once you've got it, you can use it again and again. And we are going to come up with a new tutorial. It's going to be a boxy sweatshirt. So if you have any comments, posting about how you did with the bag, we would love to see it. Happy sewing.